We all saw the original SpongeBob SquarePants movie with the bald kings, fake mustaches, David Hasselhoff, and a plot about a couple of guys no one believed in trying to get a crown. And yes, as you might have guessed, I noticed something different. I noticed there's a subtle but interesting critique of the masculine ego. That tough, hard, cold, proud one that rejects any sign of emotions or fragility. And even though on the surface it seems like a typical hero's journey, deep down it's also something very different.
To understand this, let's start from the beginning. In Bikini Bottom at the Krusty Krab, where we see there's an emergency, SpongeBob subtly arrives in a sports car, acting very confident. He demands that Mr. Krabs tell him what happened. He explains that it all started with a simple order, but when the customer bit into it, there was no cheese. Mr. Krabs breaks down crying, and SpongeBob slaps him to calm him down. SpongeBob enters the restaurant and finds a very agitated fish. Calmly, SpongeBob takes a pair of tweezers from his briefcase and dramatically places the cheese on the burger. The crowd applauds him until an alarm clock is heard. It was all a dream.
SpongeBob wakes up excited. Today is the grand opening of the Krusty Krab 2, and he's convinced he'll be made manager. After all, he's won the Employee of the Month award 374 times in a row. He happily leaves his house and passes by his neighbor, Squidward's, who is taking a shower. SpongeBob appears behind him to thank him, but Squidward yells furiously and kicks him out. SpongeBob falls next to Patrick's rock, who wakes up to congratulate him. He tells him they'll go to the peanut butter sundae party boat to celebrate later. They sing the peanut butter song together, and then SpongeBob heads to the Krusty Krab,
where reporter Perch Perkins is interviewing Mr. Krabs, who explains that his only inspiration is money. From the chum bucket, Plankton angrily watches Mr. Krabs' success while he doesn't have a single customer. He complains to his computer wife Karen, saying that if he had stolen the Krabby Patty secret formula, his restaurant would be full. He tells her he's already tried all his plans from A to Y, but Karen reminds him he's missing the letter Z. He searches his file, finds Plan Z, and thinks it's his best idea yet. He excitedly goes out announcing his revenge, but SpongeBob accidentally steps on him. As he lifts him off his shoe, SpongeBob asks him if he's going to the grand opening, and Plankton replies no, that he plans to take over the world. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs begins the opening ceremony for the Krusty Krab 2, a copy of the original right next door. SpongeBob runs to the stage, convinced he'll be promoted, but Mr. Krabs announces that the new manager will be Squidward. He tells SpongeBob that he's still too young for that position, and that he got it, they'd call him the kid-ager. SpongeBob leaves, sad and dejected.
Later, Plankton flies to King Neptune's castle as part of Plan Z. There, Neptune is about to punish a servant for touching his crown, but his daughter Mindy sets him free and suggests he should rule with more love and compassion. Neptune shows her the crown, trying to explain why it's so important, and right at that moment, Plankton appears, steals the crown, and flees. Neptune, who is bald, is horrified to see his crown is gone. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is depressed at the peanut butter sundae party boat for not being named manager. Patrick arrives thinking he succeeded, but SpongeBob explains that Mr. Krabs rejected him for being too young and prepares to leave. Then, Patrick orders a triple peanut butter sunrise, which cheers SpongeBob up, and the two start eating non-stop. They end up drenched in ice cream, demanding more, and passing out from eating so much as if they were drunk. The next day, they wake up with what looks like a hangover. That same day, March 8th, Neptune arrives at the Krusty Krab with a bag on his head to cover his baldness. He received a fake note from Plankton blaming Mr. Krabs for the theft. Mr. Krabs denies stealing it, but then a call comes in where a supposed buyer thanks him for the crown and says he sold it in Shell City. But it's actually part of Plankton's plan. Hearing this, Neptune gets even more furious and threatens to burn Mr. Krabs alive right then and there. Mr. Krabs again says he's innocent and that the citizens can defend him. Neptune asks if anyone wants to defend him, and at that moment, SpongeBob appears, drunk, complaining that he wasn't promoted to manager. He says Mr. Krabs used to be a great boss, but now he's a huge jerk, and that he's not a kid anymore, but a man.
After his speech, Neptune zaps Mr. Krabs with fire, who runs through the restaurant on fire until he jumps into a barrel of water. Seeing what's happening, SpongeBob regains his composure and tells Neptune he's overreacting about a simple crown. Neptune responds that the crown represents his authority and shows him his bald head, which scares everyone before he covers his head again. SpongeBob offers to go to Shell City to retrieve the crown and save Mr. Krabs, which draws Neptune's mockery. He says no one has ever returned alive from there and that SpongeBob is too young to do it. When he tries to continue the punishment, SpongeBob gets in the way. Neptune decides to fry both of them, but Mindy convinces him to give them a chance. At first, Neptune gives them 10 days to get the crown back, but Patrick interrupts, saying they can do it in less, so they finally agree on 6 days. SpongeBob and Patrick agree to go to Shell City, while Neptune freezes Mr. Krabs and threatens to eliminate him if they don't return.
From here, we'll start this SpongeBob movie with Plankton. Plankton is a hilarious villain, but if you look closely, he's also a little sad because he's ridiculous. He has overly dramatic plans to steal a simple burger formula, he's always complaining and threatening, and in the end, he always ends up literally and emotionally crushed.
And beneath all of Plankton's showmanship, what's really there is a desperate need to feel sufficient.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Plankton is so tiny. His size also reflects how small, fragile, and ignored he feels inside. And that feeling accompanies him all the time. He doesn't say it explicitly, but if you pay attention, there are signs. For example, his wife Karen is a computer that he himself created and made his partner. And that, honestly, says a lot. On one hand, it speaks to a genuine desire for love and companionship. But since she's a computer, it also reflects a very strong fear of rejection, just as he has probably felt his whole life. But instead of facing his shortcomings, what Plankton does is disguise them with a huge ego and an excessive ambition for power and control. And that fits very well with what's known in psychology today as compensatory narcissism. It's when a person deep down feels less, but instead of acknowledging that pain or working on it, they cover it by building an inflated image of themselves. So they become ambitious, overly competitive, obsessed with proving they can, but not from a genuine desire to grow, but from a desperate need for external validation. Because when someone needs to shout their greatness all the time, it's often because they don't believe it in silence. And that's what we see in Plankton. Additionally, Plankton doesn't want to build something of his own. What he wants is to take from Mr. Krabs what he believes he lacks himself. Success, admiration, respect, and recognition, his ego is tremendously fragile. It breaks with a single comparison. And if Mr. Krabs is successful and he's not, that in his head confirms that he's not worthy and that he's not enough. In that fear for it so much that Plankton needs the other person to fail. Because if the other person loses, then he, even if only for a moment, can feel he's on top, or that he's not as bad as he thinks. That's why his real plan is to subdue everyone, enslave them, have absolute control, because he's been accumulating that resentment for years. Years of feeling less, of being ignored, of living in someone else's shadow. And all that poorly managed pain turned into a need for power, for respect, even if it's through fear. Because when someone feels they will never be loved, at least they want to be feared. And so we can also see Plankton as a reflection of that pain, of not feeling sufficient, and the twisted ways
and sometimes destructive ways we find to try and compensate for it.
Mindy gives SpongeBob and Patrick a magical bag of winds so they can get home when they get the crown. She warns them that the path is dangerous and that outside the city, there's a giant cyclops who takes sea creatures and they never return. Patrick falls in love with Mindy. SpongeBob and Patrick leave in the Crabmobile. When they arrive at a gas station on the border, the owners mock them and their car, saying they wouldn't last even 10 seconds past it. But when they cross, a thug steals their car immediately. Still, they last because they lasted 12 seconds and keep walking.
Meanwhile, with Mr. Krabs frozen, Plankton manages to steal the Krabby Patty formula. Mr. Krabs can barely shed a tear of sadness. Plankton starts selling Krabby Patties at the Chum Bucket, and the business fills up with people. He even hands out free bucket helmets. Although he's happy, Karen reminds him that if SpongeBob and Patrick return with the crown, Neptune will destroy him. Plankton tells her he already hired a bounty hunter, Dennis, to stop them. Dennis crosses the border and attacks the gas station fish for laughing at him.
Further on, SpongeBob and Patrick find their car in the sunken bar, a place full of tough fish. They see that a thug has the car key. SpongeBob asks Patrick to distract the guys, but he just says he needs to go to the bathroom, ruining the plan. SpongeBob follows him and scolds him, but when they use soap, bubbles come out, and they end up playing. However, a bubble floats out and reaches the bar's leader, who suddenly remembers the strict policy: bubble-blowing babies will be beaten by everyone present. The leader activates the peanut butter song, that irresistible tune no bubble-blowing baby can resist. SpongeBob and Patrick fight not to sing, but the owner provokes them. Just before they give in, twins start singing and the thugs attack them. In the chaos, SpongeBob and Patrick grab the key and escape.
One of the things that struck me most when I rewatched this movie is that I noticed a critique that was quite subtle, but at the same time clear.
And it's all about the traditional masculine ego, that kind of masculinity many of us learned as kids, where being a man means being strong, tough, invulnerable. A man who never cries, never doubts, never shows fragility. But masculinity built more like a shell than a true identity. And from the beginning, that was reflected in King Neptune, in his obsession with his baldness. Because what actually triggered the movie's conflict was that someone touched his crown and exposed his bald spot.
In other words, his ego was bruised and his insecurity was exposed. And how did he react?
In a totally disproportionate, even violent way, just because someone hurt his pride. And that sadly isn't that far from reality.
How many times do we see men react with fury, with violence, when they feel their image as a strong man is wavering?
When someone touches that fragile ego. We also saw this logic a moment ago in the tough fish at the sunken bar, who only relate through competition, strength, and violence. They despise and repress any sign of tenderness or sensitivity, which they made clear with their ban on blowing bubbles.
Because that's for babies. Because what is childish, tender, emotional, or sensitive is a reason for mockery.
Or worse, for punishment. And so what we're left with is a masculinity that can only exist
if it represses everything that sounds like emotion, vulnerability, tenderness, or play.
A masculinity that is sustained solely on a foundation of fear and a constant denial of the internal world. And the truth is, that sounds deeply harmful and unhappy. But the movie seems to propose another way of being a man.
And later on, I'll make it completely clear for you.
The next day, Squidward notices everyone is wearing bucket helmets. When he confronts Plankton, he deduces that he was the one who stole King Neptune's crown to get the secret formula. He tells him he's going to report him, but before he can escape, Plankton activates a button on Karen that turns the helmets into mind control devices. Squidward tries to flee, but the controlled citizens capture him.
Meanwhile, SpongeBob and Patrick cross a field full of skulls, laughing about their victory at the bar. They find an ice cream stand, but the old lady serving turns out to be the tongue of a giant frogfish that chases them. They jump out of the car just in time before falling off a cliff. The frogfish falls and eats the car, but then it gets swallowed by a huge sea serpent that comes out of the trench. The duo sees that the path continues on the other side, but they discover that the trench is full of monsters.
SpongeBob gives up and accepts that this place is only for men and that he and Patrick are just kids. They blow bubbles, eat ice cream, and worship a dancing peanut. But then, Mindy appears and shows them what happened in Bikini Bottom while they were gone. Plankton has taken over the city using mind control helmets and turned it into Planktopolis. SpongeBob and Patrick watch in horror as everyone has been enslaved.
Squidward fans Plankton. Sandy runs on a wheel. Mrs. Puff breaks rocks. And even Gary is dragging a block.
Mindy tells them that her father is too busy worrying about his baldness to do anything. She tries to motivate them by telling them that even if they are kids, they can do it if they believe in themselves. But they just cry upon seeing their home turned into a nightmare. Then Mindy gets an idea. She says she'll turn them into men with her mermaid magic and gives them 2 fake mustaches made of seaweed. They believe her and immediately regain their confidence. They jump into the trench singing, "I'm a man," and even become friends with the monsters.
But when they get to the other side, Dennis appears and tells them he was hired to exterminate them. They laugh, but Dennis rips out their mustaches and tells them they're not real men. Then he prepares to finish them off. Accidentally, he reveals that Plankton stole King Neptune's crown and takes out retractable spikes from his boots to crush them. But before he can, a giant boot steps on him. The duo tries to thank whoever saved them, but they realize it's the feared Cyclops, a diver in an old suit with a single-eyed helmet. The Cyclops traps them and takes into his lair, which is on the surface. They wake up in a freshwater fishbowl surrounded by rocks. From there, they see the Cyclops making figurines with dead sea animals. Then he takes them out, places them under a heat lamp, and begins to dry them out.
While as Cyclops goes to the bathroom, SpongeBob gives up, believing they failed and that they were just kids who tried something too big. But Patrick sees a sign that says, Shell City Sea Gifts, and they realize they did reach their destination. They see Neptune's crown on a nearby cushion, and SpongeBob is happy to see that at least they achieved their goal, proving they are more than a couple of fools. Both cry with happiness and sing the peanut sound one last time. As they do, they slowly dry up until they become real, dry versions of their species. It seems they've died, but their heart-shaped tear falls into the socket, causes a short circuit, and turns off the lamp.
The smoke activates the sprinklers, and when the water falls, SpongeBob and Patrick revive. They go for the crown, but the Cyclops returns and traps them. Right then, the other sea creatures revive thanks to the water and rebel against him. During the fight, SpongeBob and Patrick grab the crown and run to the beach. There, SpongeBob reads the instructions for the magical bag of winds, but Patrick accidentally activates it and the bag flies away, leaving them trapped. Luckily, David Hasselhoff, a lifeguard, appears and takes them back across the ocean on his back.
But on the way, Dennis reappears with a dagger in his hand. SpongeBob begs Patrick to run away, but he refuses and tries to stop Dennis, who hits him and throws him to David Hasselhoff's foot. Then, Dennis corners SpongeBob, who tries to calm him down by offering him $5 peanut dollars. Dennis doesn't fall for it, and SpongeBob tries to distract him with bubbles, but the wind carries the bubbles to Dennis's eyes. Furious, he throws SpongeBob way away, but Patrick catches him just in time. When Dennis is about to crush him with his spiked boots, a sailboat hits him and sends him into the sea.
Meanwhile, King Neptune is about to execute Mr. Krabs, but Mindy tries to distract him. Neptune loses patience, takes her out of the restaurant, and puts a big lock on the door. Up on David Hasselhoff's back, SpongeBob fears they won't make it in time, so David opens his pecs, places the two on them, and launches them at full speed toward the Krusty Krab 2. Just as Neptune's trident ray is about to hit Mr. Krabs, the crown deflects it. SpongeBob and Patrick celebrate. Neptune gets his crown back, and Mindy congratulates them. But the joy doesn't last. Plankton puts a giant helmet on Neptune and controls him. His other slaves also invade the restaurant and surround the heroes.
Neptune aims his trident at them, and it seems all is lost. Plankton mocks them, saying SpongeBob never had a chance, because he's just a kid. SpongeBob admits it. Yes, he's a kid, and no magic, no promotion, nothing external will change that. But it's okay, because he did everything they said a kid couldn't do. He got to Shell City, defeated the Cyclops, rode on Hasselhoff, and got the crown back. He says he is a kid, and also a weirdo, a fool, and a simpleton. But above all, he is a peanut. And with that, he starts to sing a rock version of the Peanut song. Plankton orders his slaves to catch him, but SpongeBob unleashes the laser beams from his electric guitar, shattering every mind control helmet, freeing his friends and all the citizens. Plankton yells at Karen to do something, but she's too caught up in the music, too moved by the moment to listen. With no way out, Plankton tries to flee, but the freed citizens crush him in front of the restaurant.
and he ends up arrested.
And here, I'll explain another thing I really like about this movie. If you look closely, SpongeBob's story is like a hero's journey, but with a very interesting twist. SpongeBob starts out being seen as a kid. He didn't fit the mold of the serious adult that his environment demanded. Then, like in any classic hero's journey, SpongeBob went through trials, crossed boundaries, descended into the unknown, literally reached the surface, faced real dangers, was chased, captured, and died, drying in the sun. And then, he revived. He was reborn, and he returned with this sacred object, Neptune's crown. Up to that point, everything seemed to follow the traditional path. But the interesting thing was that SpongeBob didn't return transformed. He didn't become more serious, didn't become a tougher adult in the classic sense, didn't stop being funny or tender. On the contrary, he became a hero by being completely true to his essence. When he returned with the crown, with all of Bikini Bottom in danger, what he did was take out his guitar and sing his Peanut song, but now as an anthem of rebellion and authenticity. And that song, which everyone saw as silly, became an act of power that literally freed everyone. He didn't need to stop being a kid or hide his tenderness or become aggressive or harden himself. Quite the opposite. It was his naivete that drove him to accept a mission that no one else would have dared to take. It was his tenderness that sustained him in the hardest moments.
It was his loyalty to the absurd and the silly that ended up saving Bikini Bottom. Maybe maturing isn't giving up those parts of us that play, that feel, that get excited about silly things. Maybe maturing is being responsible, brave, generous, and resilient, but without turning off the tenderness, laughter, and joy of living, without turning off that inner child who is often the one who sustains us most when everything gets difficult. Maybe maturing is really just about using the best of that child we were, but now with consciousness and heart. Neptune finally values his daughter Mindy's ideas about ruling with love and compassion, recognizing that this was key to getting his crown back. He is about to leave, but Mindy reminds him that Mr. Krabs is still frozen. Neptune goes to help him, but mistakenly turns him into a child before returning him to normal. Then he apologizes to him for unfairly accusing him and tells him he's very lucky to have someone like SpongeBob on his set. As I said, the movie proposes another way of being a man, and that proposal comes from the contributions of SpongeBob and Patrick. They cry, get emotional, make mistakes, sing Peanut songs, blow bubbles without shame. And yet, they were the ones who launched into the adventure, faced real dangers, and risked everything to save others. As they said, they didn't need to give up their tenderness to be brave or become tough to prove their strength. And in the end, even Neptune himself acknowledged it. He started as an authoritative, closed-off figure who imposed himself through fear. But little by little, he understood that it was love, compassion, and cooperation that truly solved the situation.
So yes, between ice cream drunkenness, absurd Peanut songs, and rock guitars, the movie ends up proposing the idea that tenderness, empathy, compassion, and emotionality should also be part of masculinity. Because if we are not able to integrate those parts, then we are condemned to repeat a brutal, violent, despicable, and deeply unhappy masculinity. Mr. Krabs apologizes to SpongeBob for doubting him and names him manager. Squidward accepts, saying he no longer wants the position, and everyone celebrates SpongeBob. He tries to give an emotional speech but doesn't know how to say what he feels. Squidward tries to interpret what he was going to say, that he now realized he didn't want what he thought he wanted, and that what he really wanted was always inside him. But SpongeBob takes the manager badge from him, clarifying that wasn't it, and that his zipper was down. Full of joy, SpongeBob jumps, yelling that this is the best day of his life. For almost the entire movie, SpongeBob was told, directly or indirectly, that he was a kid and that he didn't fit with what was expected of a real man. And that hurts. It hurts that while you're being true to yourself without harming anyone, they tell you over and over again that you're not what you're supposed to be. Because when you hear that enough times, as happened to him, you start to believe it. You start to think that maybe you're not worthy and that the only way to be is to stop being who you are.
And that's why I loved that SpongeBob didn't change to become a hero. As I suggested before, it wasn't the typical classic hero's journey where the character returns transformed, but rather it was a journey where SpongeBob reaffirmed himself, where he realized that he didn't need to change to be worthy, that his way of being had value and power.
Maybe you don't have to toughen up to be strong. Maybe you don't need to repress your sensitivity and emotionality to be brave. Maybe you don't have to pretend anything to be worthy. And maybe, sometimes, being you, even when they tell you it's not enough, actually is.
So if you ever felt you were too much or too little of something, remember this video. Remember SpongeBob, who with his tenderness, his craziness, his absurdity, his ridiculous peanut song, and his huge heart, saved everyone.
Showed us that there are many ways to be strong. He showed us that there are many ways to be strong, that you don't have to toughen up to be resilient, that you can also be brave from a place of sensitivity, and that sometimes being yourself, even if they look at you funny, is the most powerful act of all.
Well, if you're hearing this, it means you watched the whole video. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time. It really helps me out and makes sure you don't miss any future videos. That's it for now. See you in the next one.